Hello, I am Dr. Michael Smith, and it's good to be with you today. I'm finding myself getting a little bit older in life and wondering where all of my friends are and how I can get more friends as life goes on. Fortunately, I have a good friend and colleague here with Dr. Mark Johnston, and he's had some thoughts about this as well. We are a team putting our heads together to produce a product called Mind, Mood, and Medicine, where we can talk about all kinds of topics that we think are interesting and relevant, particularly to the guys who are getting a little bit older, not quite with the same bounce that they used to have. So, Dr. Johnston, let's talk about this a little bit. How do I get more friends?
Well, I think it's an important point. I think making friends as an adult can feel harder than it maybe used to, but that's something that can be a challenge for people at any age. Actually, how do you create new relationships, and especially relationships that have a little deeper quality? We live in a world that there's a lot of activity and there's a lot of interaction by text, for example, and social media. But in terms of really closer relationships and developing the kind of friendships that a lot of people really would value and I think need and give their life meaning, I think we find ourselves sometimes not knowing quite how to go about that. And I think we need to realize that other people actually, probably many of them, uh, they're facing the same kind of challenge we are. They don't know quite how to start relationships or where to go. So I think the idea here is that friendship isn't so much about your personality, but in terms of developing friendships, you need some proximity, some repetition with people, and an environment that helps foster the relationship. And I'm going to talk about kind of three main issues. One is, how do you create opportunities for friendship? In other words, kind of the right environments. The second one is initiating conversation and connection. How do you go about it? What do you say? Uh, and how do you interact when you're just getting to know somebody in a way that will really support opportunity for friendship? And finally, how do you build a relationship over time? Make it more than just not just an initial get to know you, but really do the kind of things that can foster a deeper relationship as you go along.
Well, thanks for that. I think you're a good example to me of how to go about this. I've watched you over the years in different settings, and you are a friendly person. And I think your ability to make friendships has enhanced your life, but also enhanced the lives of those that you've made friends with and nurtured those friendships. So let me just ask a little precisely now. Someone who's, let's say, 70 years old or older, feeling like they are feeling too lonely, where do they go? Is there a location where you can go find friends? When you're young, when you're in elementary school age, obviously you're in this environment where you've got friends that are just ready to be there for you. But as we get older, that situation changes. So how do we go about finding the right place, first of all, to find friends?
That's a great question, I think. And a lot of times, some of the loss of opportunity for seniors has been retirement and the loss of friends at work or relationships at work and the opportunity to see different people during the day. It can be actually people passing away too, especially in the older age groups. People get sick, they move, they may no longer be available to us. So this becomes a more important issue. How do you replenish your connections, and how do you build? You might have lost a friend of 30 or 40 years. That's can be hard and even pretty intimidating to think, well, I'll never have a friend like that again. It's surprising how close friendships can be even and built, if they're built well over even a short period of time, and provide a lot of meaning. But the basic answer to your question is, I think, places that people can gather, classes, for example, a lot of universities or local institutions may have senior classes, clubs. Volunteer work, I've always thought, is an excellent, and there are all kinds of volunteer organizations that would really appreciate some help. A lot of times it's something that can work into the rest of your life. And the volunteer work means that you meet people kind of side to side. You're not faced so much with having to create conversation and be witty or something, but you're kind of working side to side. It kind of puts people on an equal footing. So that's a great place. And if you can find a place too that has some shared interests, maybe you're interested in art or Japanese flower arranging or something like that, or flower arranging. There are places that if you look a little bit, you can find an environment that will be satisfying in a lot of ways, including continuing learning.
Yeah. Well, those are some good ideas. So let's suppose that I go to one of these volunteer places. I'm working alongside of someone involved in the same endeavor that I am. And I think they might be good friend potential. But I'm a little uncertain about how to go about striking up a conversation, or I feel a little bit introverted myself, and I just want to wait for somebody else to do it. Do you have some suggestions for me in that situation?
I think one thing to be aware of is even if you're tend to be an introvert, just being open and realizing that, getting to know people can be a little awkward for folks and you're willing to tolerate a little bit of that. Just being a good listener, you don't have to be having a lot of clever things to say or one-liners or something like that. Just be thoughtful and ask a little bit, you know, what brings you in? How long have you come to this place, or belong to this club? And just asking a few well-meaning, simple questions like that can be helpful. And being curious, not trying to be impressive. So many people, a lot of us, we think we can all recognize this. When somebody else is talking, there's a tendency to think, well, what am I going to say next? Instead of listening closely and responding, perhaps with a follow-up question. Listening well and follow-up questions are a great way to really build that connection with somebody else. And you use the environment as a bridge. In other words, the task that you're doing, talking about if it's the flower arranging or whatever it is, or um, I think that way the pressure isn't so much immediately on the relationship, and relationships take time. You have to accept some imperfection. But you wanna signal openness, you wanna meet eye contact if you can. Again, you wanna be positive and encouraging without being artificial. That's really a lot of people very interesting if you give them a chance to talk about things that they care about. Uh, so I think it's not always as hard as it might seem. And yes, it does take a little courage, but there's a big payoff for that courage.
Yeah, I think you're making some really good points. You're making me recall the book by Dale Carnegie, written many years ago. I'm not sure when he wrote that exactly, but How to Win Friends and Influence People. And he talked about a
Yeah.
couple of things there about speaking in terms of the other person's interests. So if I approach someone, and I may be guilty of this, and I just talk about what's interesting to me or what my history is, they may ask a few polite questions, but that's probably not going to generate a very solid connection. But if I can talk to them in terms of with a genuine curiosity, not an invasive curiosity or intrusive curiosity, but just a friendly curiosity about their life and their history and their interests, I think that will help to facilitate making a good connection there. And I think also the other point that Dale Carnegie made in his book is using a person's name, which I've discovered it's really easy to quickly forget someone's name immediately after they introduce themselves. And I think that's unfortunate. I don't think that's an insurmountable problem. I think people can develop strategies for remembering the name of someone that they've just met. One thing I've tried to do and that I believe is effective is use that name quickly after you meet them. So if somebody says, "Hey, my name is John," you respond in a sentence or two by asking John and using his name, his opinion about something. So
Sure.
anyway, I think those 2 things can help to facilitate is, ask about what they're interested in. They'll probably reciprocate and ask what you're interested in as well, and using their names and trying to remember that. Dale Carnegie made the point. I don't know if there's ever been studies on this, but most people would, according to Dale Carnegie, say that their favorite word in the language is, or their favorite sound is the sound of their own name.
Yeah.
Be interesting to put somebody in a PET scan and see how the brain lights up when they hear their name versus other things, but there's probably some truth to that.
Yeah.
So
It's some of these things you're talking about, they don't have to be they're not you're not just trying
contrived.
to contrive, you're not some but I think practically, it gives you the opportunity for developing that closeness over time where using their name and knowing them will be more automatic and so forth. But you're right. I think having some things you can do to help you out. One thing too is after you've gone to like a club meeting or something like that, or a volunteer place. If there's a person in particular or a couple people that you really enjoyed, when you leave, write yourself a little note. I met Hazel, who really, we really seemed to hit it off. She enjoys flower arranging, but never had tried it until last year or something like that. And you make a little bit of an anchor in the name with you, and that I think some of those kind of things, when you see her next time in the club or whatever, I think it'll be easier to kinda hang on to that. So, again, that might seem a little more artificial but, really it's a simple thing to do, and practicing a few of those techniques at times, using the name right away, like you mentioned, is an excellent way to go. But it also is true that as we age, we don't always hold on to, even without dementia, we don't always hold on to names as well. And we live in a world where we have a flood of superficial connections a lot of times, it seems. And so there may be a tendency to think, I'm almost be in the mode, I'm not going to see this person again or whatever. Not sure if it's that conscious for some people, but I think at least there's not much investment in really listening to the name. And, in
Yeah.
different cultures, it's interesting. In Japan, it's a etiquette that when you exchange business cards, you just don't take it and slap it in your pocket or put it away. You pause and you look at it carefully and you look at the reverse side. That's a tradition of showing respect and that actually you're interested in the relationship and so forth. It's just the way it's done. I think we need to be careful too that when we say hello to people and so forth, it's just not kind of a superficial, reflexive kind of thing that we're putting a little energy in. And your Dale Carnegie comments, can I say one thing more about that, Mike? 'Cause I think
Thanks.
that's that. Yeah, Dale Carnegie, there was some research that he talked about that where they had people that they looked at conversations and then they interviewed people afterwards of what they thought of the other person and so on. And there were a lot of examples where the other person basically didn't say anything much at all about themselves. They only asked questions. And typically, what would happen in the post interview review and research was that the person that was doing the talking said, that person I was with is a great conversationalist. In other words, letting the person have the floor, being willing to be a good listener may end up reflexively make you seem like the person that really had something to say. And so, in any event, those things balance out over time, and especially as you get to know each other and can kind of trade back and forth. But I think all of us need to be cautious of the tendency to grab the mic, so to speak, and not relinquish it, because it's nice to hear ourselves talk about what we care about. And when you ask about grandkids or you ask about certain hot button kind of things, there can be a tendency to go on and on. But I
Yeah,
think we need to be careful and realize the goal is to build a relationship, not just to have a floor for ourselves.
right. Now, Mark, you have used the term several times now, over time. So that makes me think that this is not something that usually is an instant process. It's something that, as you've said several times, occurs over time. Now, I do think that sometimes you can really connect quickly with somebody, but to really have a meaningful friendship, I think the time element needs to be considered. Do you want to talk a little bit about strategies for nurturing a connection that you might have started with somebody?
Yeah, I think what's important is some consistency. Again, if you show up um, at a volunteer group, this month, and then you don't come back for a couple of months, this kind of thing, it's awfully hard to really expect to build a relationship or be recognized or have the same opportunity. So if you can make some commitment to make it a little more regular effort, even if it's a short time expenditure and so forth, some regularity is important. And also what you mentioned, just the awareness, friendship can take some time to develop. And it's surprising. It can come pretty quickly. And some people just naturally do hit it off. We've all probably had some relationships where it seemed almost that we had been friends even before we first met, just because we seem to have a natural quality of communication and connection. But it does take some time. Regular touch points help with friendships. If somebody said, I'm going in for, if you have a telephone number of somebody, for example, they're going in for a blood test or something, simple touches like calling up and saying, I wasn't this the day you're going in for your blood test? Sure hope that goes well for you, or this kind of thing. My mother is an excellent example of connecting with people. She remembers their events, their life events. She remembers things about them that matter to them, and a great model for me. I'm not as good at it as she is, I don't think. But when you talk about building friendships, the touch points over time are important, and showing reliability, following through. If you're going to meet somebody somewhere, you're planning to go and be with them or be with the group, it really helps when you can make it regular and make it predictable. So again, yeah, the you need a kind of a rhythm. You need to share kind of gradually. You don't expect to tell everything about yourself. I think it can be enticing when somebody is listening to you too, to if you've got issues and you're upset about maybe the father-in-law is difficult personality or whatever, there can be a tendency to unload, to reveal a little bit more of what's on your mind or some of the troubling and difficult things, and that can be an outlet that's appropriate for friendships in the in the right moment perhaps, or with the right foundation of friendship, but that's not something you lead with and so forth. And so you don't go to the flower arranging club or the MS volunteer group, and first person you say, well, I think my daughter is going to leave her husband or something like that. That's more private, more sensitive, and if there's some of those issues that are really difficult for you, maybe therapy is the place to consider. Uh, but again, a brand new friendship or friendship you're trying to establish is not the place to kind of be telling all the secrets, all the challenges and so forth. Give it a
Yeah,
chance with some more neutral things.
I agree with that. As you're talking, I'm thinking of inorganic chemistry of all things. Um, I remember back in the day when doing little bit of lab work in a chemistry lab. I think you went through similar experiences. There's the concept of titration, where you carefully calibrate how much of a product you're putting into something else. If you go too fast or too slow, it doesn't work very well. And I think that concept works well in chemistry to consider how to titrate the the mixture that you're creating. I think in
Sure.
relationships, the idea of titration kind of makes sense to me too, that you kind of have to think of pacing it. Um, and I think not unloading everything, maybe that works in some cases, but I think more often than not, that's going to be overwhelming to someone who really doesn't know that much about you otherwise. You know,
Oh, yeah.
the other thing, Mark, that I thought we might mention, we brought this topic up previously, the idea of cognitive behavioral therapy. And the way a cognitive behavioral therapist thinks is they help people to identify patterns of thinking that may not be accurate or valid. Um, and part of the process of cognitive behavioral therapy is to recognize those thoughts that could be wrong and consider other possibilities that are more likely to be right. For example, somebody cuts you off in traffic and it's easy to think everybody's a horrible driver. Well, you know, that's kind of overgeneralization and it's assuming too much because not everybody is a horrible driver.
Where this
Um,
person was purposefully trying to cause me problems or something.
yeah, right. It may be just a singular event there. And I think I mentioned to you earlier, my grandson taught me this years ago. When he gave a talk in church and he addressed the people in the group as hello friends. He looked at everybody and saw them as friends. I think as life goes on, it's pretty easy for us to look at a group of people and think to ourselves, hello competitors, or hello rivals, or hello people who don't really like me. And I think those are cognitive errors. We're assuming too much about those that we might be talking to. And when you bump into somebody at the store or at the gym or at the library, I think if you automatically assume they're a competitor or a challenger, to you, you're making an error. They're not automatically that. And if you assume that they are your friend to begin with, maybe they'll prove you wrong, but they might prove you right as well. And I think approaching each other with that cognition of assuming that you're going to be my friend may facilitate that um, relationship going forward.
I think those are excellent observations. I think I'll make another comment that isn't the converse of that at all, but I think it's something to mention, and that is not everybody out there will necessarily want to be your friend, even when you're as open, even when you listen well, or will they necessarily share kind of perspectives and interests and or a concept of having a new relationship that really may fit with what you would hope for in your friends. So, in other words, you don't have to win over every person. There are going to be people that you run into that maybe their life history too is one of some disappointments with other people, maybe even mistreatment by other people, and you don't quite know where they come from. So, in other words, don't judge yourself too much if somebody else doesn't seem to be willing to be more open or to develop a relationship. That just can be the way it is. One
Yeah.
nice thing about these, like a volunteer group that might have, 10, 20 people working shoulder to shoulder on something, maybe preparing food for a food bank or who knows what, is that you have a chance to have some connection with a number of different people, and you can have the opportunity to find the people that seem to have maybe you're looking for humor, maybe you're looking for a certain kind of uh, way of being and so forth. But being involved in groups like that can give you a selection of people too, where you may find people that you especially like.
Good. This has been a good discussion, Mark. I know we could go on at great length about some strategies. I think this is an important topic. The Surgeon General, as we've mentioned before, has noted that loneliness is a big problem in the world's in society nowadays, and it certainly has a big health impact. So I think it's a relevant topic. I think not only thinking about how to cultivate a new friendship, but I think also cultivating the current friendships that we have and not taking them for granted is something worth considering as well. Mark, we've covered some good territory here. Do you want to summarize what we've covered? And
Sure, sure. Let me do my best to kind of leave you with 5 nuggets to kind of take away. The first is friends come from places, not just wishing to have friends. In other words, you need to put yourself where people are. You can't just hope that you will find a friendship without going out there and being part of an environment.
good,
Secondly, repetition creates comfort. Don't expect to have a brand new friend or something with one visit to a new organization or something. Keep showing up if you can. Set some kind of rhythm and predictability to the budding relationship, and that will help you to build friendships. And, uh, you know, it's important to realize, as you said, that other people have their needs too. And many people are really hoping for what you hope for, which is a connection that matters. So most people are actually going to be glad that you reached out to them. So it's a gift to show interest in other people. And it's something I think a lot of people would appreciate. And then finally realize that friendship can grow slowly, and that's okay. You don't have to be best friends right away. And if you've been lonely and haven't had a lot of contact, there can be a tendency to try to look to this new person is a solution for a lot of that loneliness, but realize that everyone needs time and to develop the connection with you, and it's okay if it takes a while to happen. So those are the things. Remember to put yourself out there in the place, not just wish. Repetition, ask, listen, be a good listener. Remember that initiating contact is a gift and most people will value and appreciate it. And finally, that friendship does grow slowly and we need to respect.
thank you very much for your thoughts on this, Mark. I do think this is an important topic. This is fun to work with you on this project, Mind, Mood, and Medicine, with Dr. Mark Johnston and Dr. Michael Smith. And we hope to offer some challenging and encouraging thoughts to people who might tune in and listen to us. I know that when you and I talk, I believe your thoughts are stirred and mine are as well, and that's always a good experience. So anyway, good to be with you, Mark. I think we'll go ahead and sign off.